We look at lightsaber disarming.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
If we look at European sword fighting, or if we look at Filipino martial arts sword fighting, then we can recognize a lot of it deals with disarming the opponent. If we now think of lightsaber fencing, we should see disarms here. The most common type of disarm we see with the lightsaber is cutting off the hand of the opponent. That's in fact something we also see in late medieval or early modern times fencing manuals. Still, that's not what I mean. I mean real disarming techniques here that could be used. And the main problem for disarms with a lightsaber and disarming a lightsaber is you cannot really touch the blade. Yes, you can use the force to push or pull on the blade, that's in theory possible, but the standard techniques for disarming, using the own handle to hook in between blade and arm, or use the own blade to hook in there. This does not work because that always means I cut off the hand of the opponent or I cut through the handle of the opponent, and I can also not push properly against the blade of the opponent. So most of our standard disarms that we know from Filipino martial arts and also from all the medieval fencing manuals, I will link quite some videos in the description box to different types of disarms, cannot be used on a lightsaber. That does not mean we have no disarms with a lightsaber. On the contrary, there are quite some that we can apply. If we look at German Messerfechten, for example, there are lock techniques, which means that I lock the weapon of the opponent, and in some of them I can use them to disarm. And also, if we look at different disarm techniques in FMA that are related to wrist locks, we can in fact apply some stuff to lightsaber. We will go through 4 disarms, one for each of the attack angles, and the idea is always very simple. We take in the incoming force, we redirect the force, and while doing so, we step forward with the left foot, use our left hand to grasp the butt, so the end of the lightsaber hilt of the opponent. We push with our own blade against the blade of the opponent, and by this we can wind out the lightsaber out of the hands of our opponent. These are techniques that really work also with steel weapons or with sticks. Very simple. And we could, of course, then easily follow up with a cutting motion. But this type of disarm could, for example, be used if you want to stop an opponent without killing or heavily hurting that person. And the beauty is it also works with our props, which means actions like this can be included into different shows. And that's, of course, an interesting dramaturgy. If you engage in a lightsaber fight, then you are able to disarm the opponent with the disarms we're showing here. We have another advantage. The weapon is not dropping onto the ground, but we have it then in our hand, and then the other person could, for example, counter disarm, and by this you get an interesting fighting dramaturgy in your choreography. It's important to take a bit of care about the direction, so attack in angle 1, redirecting to the other side leads to a chicken wing type disarm, so a clockwise type of disarm where the blade is usually facing downwards with the entrance. Against angle 2, we see a counterclockwise movement, so a figure 4 type of disarm. We also see a figure 4 type of disarm against angle 3. With lower attacks, it's important to remember that you have to move away your feet, otherwise you redirect the attack of the opponent right into your legs, and then we can disarm here as well. With the attack in angle 4, we have the choice. We could, of course, also redirect the attack and then disarm, but in fact we can simply block this motion, and then the opponent basically is already in the position where we can effectively disarm him or her. These are not the most elegant disarms, but they really work very simply. We can further explore other disarms whenever we have, for example, the chance to make make an arm lock. We could also use that for disarm, for stripping the lightsaber out of the hand of the opponent, but then it would fall down, and depending on the ground, this might scratch the lightsaber, or if you have a very cheap polycarbonate tube as blade, might even shatter the lightsaber. This means the disarms we are showing here are probably the most reliable ones. If you compare, the one against angle 1 and angle 4 is in fact very, very similar. What we have done is redirecting angle 1 basically brings us into a position very similar to angle 4, but you can recognize the blade is, our own blade is in a different relative position to the blade of the opponent. So when we are pushing against the blade for disarm, it's basically reversed. Where our tip is, there is the handle in the other position and vice versa, but it's still possible to push in both cases. With angle 2, we usually have to move so far to disarm that we have to remove our lightsaber blade from bind and then reinstall it, and then we usually do it in the same way as we would do it with the attack on angle 3, and therefore these two look very similar at first, but in fact with angle 2 we can make a very fast disarm at an earlier point, so to say, along the motion set. Both of them are counterclockwise, but angle 2 we can enter earlier into the real disarm than with angle 3. I know disarms are not very popular with sword fighting because apparently these cannot be often used in tournaments. It's also not very popular with a lot of steel weapons when training because people don't want to drop their steel weapons, not because you could damage the steel weapon, but often you could damage the ground. And so if we look at the lightsaber, we have the additional problem that a lot of the typical disarms will not work, and also depending on the prop we are using, if we are, for example, want to disarm with the blade against the handle, we have the trouble that we have the polycarbonate tube then touching metal parts, which you easily can damage a polycarbonate tube. So a lot of people try to avoid that. But these simple disarms we are using here that are related to wrist locks work very reliably, and as I said, can pep up your lightsaber fencing quite a bit. We will look at more lightsaber fencing techniques that are a bit more unusual in future videos, but these ones give you probably already a taste that although we are rather limited with the lightsaber in sense of complex techniques that we can do, there's still more to lightsaber fencing than simply banging these weapons against each other until they break. With this, I have to say, we hope we could inspire you with these ideas, although they are not that mainstream this time, and we hope to see you around next time.